everybody, and welcome to our special Chaim cheesecake bake-in. And this week we're going to be making a lime and cheesecake, a no-bake lime cheesecake. And you're here today with me and with Rabbi Anthony Gilbert. Now, usually what we do on an event like this is we'd start off with me doing some baking. I'd start it off, I'd get it in the oven, and then I'd hand over to Rabbi Gilbert. But we're doing it slightly differently this week. So this week, because this cheesecake requires no baking whatsoever, it's just a production. I'm going to ask Rabbi Gilbert to speak to you first, and he's going to talk to us tonight about the festival of Shavuot, which starts next week. So it's my pleasure to hand over to Rabbi Gilbert.
Thank you very much, Claire, and a good evening and a welcome to everybody. I'm going to speak about Shavuot tonight, and I'm going to borrow a few words that were spoken by Rabbi Cooperman, our esteemed Rav, a couple of weeks ago on Shabbos morning. I know that quite a few people were not in shul on a Shabbos morning, so maybe apart from Claire and myself, this is completely new for everybody else. The question is posed on a number of occasions. Why is Shavuot regarded as the poor relative of the three foot festivals of Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot? Pesach lasts 8 days in the diaspora. Sukkot lasts 7 days, and then the Shmini Atzeret, and then the Simchat Torah, a combination of 9 days of Yom Tov, which is a fantastic celebration in the autumnal season at the end of the year. And Pesach, to start the agricultural year in the springtime with the barley harvest, is a great start to the year. All enjoyable festivals. And Pesach celebrates Yetzias Mitzrayim, the going out from Egypt. And Sukkot is in remembrance of the divine presence that hovered over Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, while they wandered and lived and encamped in Sukkot shacks in the Midbar, in the desert, for 40 years after they came out of Egypt. So you get Shavuot. And what does Shavuot celebrate? Shavuot celebrates the giving of the Torah. No Pesach, no Sukkot, no Rosh Hashanah, no Yom Kippur, no 10 Commandments if we didn't have Shavuot. And punct. Shavuot is just 2 days in the diaspora and 1 day in Israel. Now, if we had to take an evaluation as to the importance of all of the festivals, Shavuot would rank as the most important festival, as no Torah, no Jewish people, no heritage, nothing at all. So why would God command Uviyom HaBikurim on the festival of the first fruits, which is Shavuot, that it has to be kept on the 50th day of the Omer? We count 49 days between Pesach and Shavuot, and it comes to the 50th day, which is Shavuot, bang, right in the middle of the harvest festival of the wheat. And we know that everything's associated with the Shavuot as the story of the wheat. We know about the gleanings in the field from the story from the book of Ruth, which we read on the second day, that Ruth went into the field of Boaz, and there she met Boaz, and Boaz gave instructions that any gleanings that were left was for Ruth. Even though she was a stranger in the area, she wasn't an actual inhabitant of the area. Nevertheless, she was entitled to anything that she wanted to take, according to Boaz, the gleanings, the droppings, what's left from the field of Boaz. Wow. So we were getting to get a little bit of a feel of what Shavuot is really all about. It's a harvest festival. It's one of the primary festivals of the calendar, whereby it surrounds the agricultural cycle, yes, of the wheat harvest. wheat. We make the bracha, Hamitzi lechem min haaretz, that Hashem brings forth Hamitzi lechem, bread from the earth. We know very well a loaf of bread, a made product, doesn't come out of the earth. Basically, a person has to plant and sow the seeds so that the wheat grows. And even when the wheat grows, it has to be separated from the chaff. It has to be winnowed, and it has to go through the mill, and then it makes flour. Once it makes flour and it's mixed with water, which needs human intervention, then ultimately you get a cooked product after you've put it into the oven, mixed water and flour and what have you together. You get a form of dough, bread. So we see here, first of all, there is a partnership between a human being, yes, man or woman, and they bake, as you're going to, tonight you're not necessarily using flour, but on many occasions you use flour, water, eggs. It needs the intervention of a man or a woman to put all the ingredients together, but the ingredients ultimately, yes, make a cake or a loaf of bread or what have you, but the raw produce was brought from the earth, especially when we talk about flour, was brought from the earth in the partnership between a man or a woman who planted, who sowed the seeds. Yes, God gave nutrition into the ground, fertilized the ground, sustained the ground, irrigated the ground with rain, and grew the crops. And we see that the crops only grow at a certain time of the year to sustain us as human beings with food. Therefore, Hashem doesn't make demands on people that are beyond man's capability. He always makes things available to man at the right time, in the right way. And we see this way, in the correct way, in a fair way, when it comes to the festival of Shavuot. If Shavuot was 8 days, what would happen? The whole system of the farm system of working, of harvesting in the fields would come to a stop because we're not allowed to work on Yom Tov. God forbid there was rain. God forbid the sun was burning down too heavily onto the ground. What would happen? The wheat would suffer. It wouldn't be in its pristine state at the time of the year when it's the time of Chag HaKatzir. It's the time of the cutting of the wheat, the time which is Shavuot day, when it's at its best. So if it was 8 days, it would lose production. It would dissipate in its quality. There wouldn't be, it may be overripened. And therefore, Hashem said, I'm making this festival called Shavuot, which is part of the wheat harvest. I'm not going to overburden the farmers. I'm not going to overburden the Jewish people. I'm going to make sure that the poor people who can take the gleanings, the leavings from it, are going to have it straight away. They don't have to wait 8 days till the festival is finished. Shavuot is only going to be 1 day, and we keep it as 2 days at the most in the diaspora. Hashem never makes demands on us that are going to cause us harm, God forbid, in our health, or hopefully, especially to a farmer, a financial loss. Pesach could last 8 days with the barley harvest because it was something that could be done within that time frame. The ingathering of the crops at Sukkot, 8 days, 7 or 8 days, could be done at that time of the year. It could be done because there was an ingathering of the crops and there wasn't a time sequence and a clock to beat. But with the wheat, a precious commodity, there was only that space of time which enabled the farmer to gather in the crops in a safe and productive way. And that's why Hashem only made Shavuot, 1 day in Israel, and we celebrate it 2 in the diaspora. So I think that for this year, it's a new take on Shavuot. We've spoke about many subjects over the last few years about Shavuot, but this is all about time management this year, the festival of Shavuot. So we shall have, Be'ezus Hashem, an enjoyable Yom Tov. And thank you for listening to me. And I hand you back to Claire.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Gilbert. That was lovely. I love the fact that each year, when we do our regular annual cheesecake bake, you find something new to tell us, something interesting, something uplifting. And I'll definitely be thinking about that this year on Shavuot, which will be occurring next week on Monday and Tuesday. So thank you very much, Rabbi Gilbert.
Pleasure.
It's been lovely to see you. So I'll let you go now. And we're coming back to me, and we're going to start on the cooking part of this evening. Now, this year, I chose to show you how to make a no-bake cheesecake, because there's a lot of people who find making cheesecakes a little bit intimidating. And the benefit of a no-bake cheesecake is there's so little that can go wrong. This is a fantastic recipe. It actually originated as an advert for Sainsbury's supermarket, and it is a lime and mascarpone cheesecake. But you don't have to use mascarpone. It's very, very difficult in Leeds to get hold of Chalav Yisrael mascarpone cheese. So if you can't get hold of mascarpone, any medium or full fat cream cheese will do the trick, and it will be delicious. So this is a great cheesecake recipe. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask Stuart, please, would you show my hands now? And I'm going to start showing you how to make this cheesecake. So if we can, that's brilliant, fantastic. So if you can have a look here, what I have here is a 7-inch, that's I think 21 centimeters, springform cake tin. And what I've done is I've just cut out a circle of baking parchment just to line the bottom of my tin with, so that my cheesecake won't stick too much to the bottom of it. So there it is, it's all ready. So what we're starting off with is 200 grams of ginger nut biscuits. These are ginger biscuits, and what I've done with these is I've popped them in the food processor and I have whizzed them up until they've formed very fine breadcrumbs. There's the odd slightly larger lump, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you don't have a food processor, what you can do is put your ginger nut biscuits into a plastic bag, seal the end, grab hold of something heavy, something like a rolling pin would do the trick, and bash it until you get a fine mix. You're looking for kind of like a breadcrumb sort of mix. Now, you won't get it as fine when you bash it up with a rolling pin as you do when you do it in a food processor, but that's fine. It just gives you that little bit more texture. So the next thing I need to do is I've got 60 grams of butter here. It's about 2 ounces, and this needs to be melted. So you can melt this in a pan, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop this in the microwave for a minute until it's melted, and then I'm going to add it to my biscuit crumbs. So, whoops, excuse me for that. That was extremely not very clever of me. I managed to knock my whole chair over. That's what happens when you do live TV. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix the melted butter in with my biscuit crumbs. And what I'm wanting to do is to get all of the crumbs totally moistened so that they will form a proper firm base for my cheesecake. So I'm just going to check on that. I can hear it bubbling away in the background. Now this particular cheesecake I like tremendously because it's made with limes, and I love the taste of limes, but not everybody's keen on the taste of limes. So if you don't like the taste of limes, you could substitute it for 2 lemons, or you could use 1 large orange, and you need to use the zest and the juice of it. So I think my butter is just about melted. I shall go and fetch it. And here we go. So here's my melted butter. It's actually sizzling away nicely there. I'm going to pour it very carefully because I do not want to burn myself with my butter. There we go. And I'm going to mix it in And you just have to be patient with this. At the first, it looks as if this is just not going to be enough butter to moisten up all those biscuit crumbs. But if you just keep working at it, and it is very, very important that you get it thoroughly mixed, that every single bit of biscuit is coated in a bit of butter. You don't have to use butter. You could use margarine if you prefer. I happen to really like the taste of butter. So once it's all been totally coated in the butter, then you need to pour it over your parchment, your baking parchment in the bottom of your baking tin. Now, if you do not press this down firmly enough, your base will not hold its shape. And what you're really, really wanting is to make sure that you've eased it in so it's all level, and then you want to smooth it off so that you've got a lovely, firm, smooth biscuit base. And what I'd normally do at this stage is I'd pop it in my refrigerator just to set. For the moment, I'm just going to put it to the side. So if you can have a look there, you'll see you get a lovely smooth finish. And it's especially a smooth finish in this case because I use the food processor. So it means that you do get a very nice smooth finish. What you can do if you prefer is you can actually draw some of the biscuit to go up the sides, and then you'll get more of a container out of your biscuit crumbs. But I'm not really so bothered for that for the moment. I'm just going to put this to the side. And then what we'll do, I'm going to clean my fingers because I've got lots of biscuit crumbs and butter. And let's get on to the next part of making this dish. So in this bowl here, I have 500 grams, that's about a pound of cream cheese. And the cream cheese, it's quite kind of thick and heavy at the moment. So what I'm going to do to begin with is I'm actually going to get a spatula and I'm going to mix it up a bit just to soften it. There we go. And make it easier for mixing the rest of the ingredients in. I always find it's a good idea. My good friend, the late Louise Haft, always said, if you're making a cheesecake, do this. Loosen up your cream cheese before you get started. So that's nice and loosened. Now to this, I'm going to add the zest and the juice of 2 limes. So I'm just going to show you here. There's a specific way of getting the best out of your zest and juice from your limes. Now, with the zest, it's important. What you need is a microplane type of grater. Now, this is a grater that will only take the very, very top layer of my lime. That is really important because if you've got a grater that is too rough, it will take the pith that's underneath the outer layer. And the outer layer is the bit that's got the most flavour. So the best way to do this is to just give it 2 rubs, and then that will take out just the really bright green, but it won't give you the bitter pith because we really want to avoid the bitter pith. So I'm just going to work my way round my microplane. I have to tell you, the scent that is being released by this lime zest as I'm grating it is absolutely gorgeous. I love lime because it's so zingy and fresh, and to me lime tastes of spring, which is one of the reasons why I particularly like it for this festival. But I have to tell you that last week, a couple of weeks ago, in preparation for Shavuot, I made another cheesecake because why make one cheesecake when you can have 2? So I made a white chocolate and raspberry cheesecake, which is currently sitting in my freezer. And that is ready for Shavuot because what I'm hoping is that various people are going to pop around my house in the afternoon, come round into the back garden, weather permitting, because now that we can have different people in our gardens. And I'm hoping that they will all come round and come and have a slice of cheesecake with me.
Excuse me, Claire.
Yes?
Can you use tea biscuits instead of ginger biscuits, somebody has asked?
I wouldn't use rich tea biscuits. What I would use is digestive biscuits. So if you don't want to use ginger biscuits, use 200 grams of digestive biscuits, and it's still, again, 60 grams of butter or margarine. So But this is the most important part, is to get all of that zest. And also the essential oils from the zest are actually, you can't see it, but they're zinging into this bowl as well. And that also is what will add to the flavour. And it's more important, the zest, than even the juice, believe it or not. There we go. So that's our zest. And what I'm going to do is, you can see there, bits of zest have got caught on the back of my grater. So I'm just going to make sure that I get all that in there. That's lovely. Right, so here we have, so this is what it looks like, the zest from 2 limes. It isn't really a huge amount, but it gives a wallop of flavour. So I'm just going to put that all into my cream cheese. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze my limes. So I'm going to grab a sharp knife. Here we go. Interesting thing about limes. Now, my late mother-in-law would swear that if you popped them in the freezer for an hour or so, then defrosted them, you would get a lot more juice out of your lime than if you just have them as they are. Other people I know will roll them with a little bit of pressure through your hand. And the idea of this is that it should make it easier for you to get as much juice as possible out of your lime. And another way to get more juice out of your lime is, rather than cutting it through the circumference, if you cut it end to end, allegedly, this is a good way, cut it so it's like that, allegedly that is a good way of getting more juice out of your lime. It's only the juice of 2 limes. I like to use my little wooden juicer implement. I find that works really well. Now, do we have any more questions while I'm going at this, seeing as any questions from anybody?
There's none come up at the moment.
None come up, that's absolutely fine. So as you can see, quite a lot of juice comes out of quite a small lime. And what I find interesting is you tend not to get very many seeds in limes, but I'm squeezing, rather than squeezing my lime direct onto the cream cheese, I'm squeezing the lime into the bowl just in case I come across any seeds, then I can pick them out. If a lot of seeds came out, I'd possibly put this through a sieve just to be on the safe side. There. So here's the last of the lime. And I would say, looking at this, that looks like about 75, 80 mils of liquid to me. It's quite a lot. There we go. So I'm going to move those out of the way. There we go. So I'm going to add now this juice of 2 limes. There we go. And the last ingredient I need to add in is about 40 ounces, about 40 grams, about 1.5 ounces of icing sugar. You can use caster sugar if you don't have icing sugar, but this tends to give you a better texture. So I'm just going to dry my hands because they're covered in lime juice. Just be warned, if you've got any little cuts on your hands, you will feel it if you're then squeezing lime juice. It's a little uncomfortable. There we go. So this doesn't look very appealing at the moment, but all I'm going to do now is gradually start working it in together. Now, one thing I would say, if you're using a lower fat alternative, like a lower fat cream cheese, you don't always get as firm a texture. This is a very, very dense cheesecake, I must point out. When you're making a baked cheesecake, because they have eggs in, they tend to be a little bit lighter. This is quite a dense cheesecake. If you use a low fat alternative, it doesn't always set that well. So medium or full fat, I would always use full fat if you've got a choice. There we go. So there we are. That's all beautifully fully mixed in. Now at this point, it really should have a taste. And the reason why you need to have a taste of this is because some limes are more bitter than others. And it's always worth having a taste to see if you need to add a little bit more sugar. Let's have a taste now. That is absolutely perfect. Does not need any more sugar. Does not need any more of anything. So there we go.
I've got another comment for you.
Yeah.
Another comment, Claire.
Yeah.
Somebody says it's an anonymous attendee. And they say, I love watching you doing these recipes. Next year, could you make cheese blintzes and cheesecake? Doing a cheesecake now.
No, I have to. I've got a little bit of I've never made cheese blintzes in my entire life, so I'm going to have to learn how to make cheese blintzes if I'm going to teach you how to make them. So if I actually pluck up the courage and learn how to make cheese blintzes, I'll show you how to make them next year. Yes, and I will show you how to make a baked cheesecake again next year. I did. In fact, there should be a recording, which I haven't been given, and I will chase it up. But I did make 2 weeks ago a white chocolate and raspberry cheesecake. That was a baked one. And that certainly is somewhere on the ether. There is a recording of that somewhere on the ether that I can hand out. And last year, we did just a regular baked cheesecake. I could certainly do a New York style one. Right, so what I'm doing here, I haven't greased the inside of this tin. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to smooth it down. And I'm actually going to have to use my fingers there to get that off. There we are. And to smooth it down. And if when you've tasted it, you feel that it's not sweet enough, you can always add a little bit more sugar to this recipe. So, and as I said, this is quite a dense cheesecake. You really won't need a very large slice of it. So if we have a look here, and I think that's pretty much done. So I'm going to clean my fingers off, and I'm just going to show you what I've done is I've smoothed it down. Don't worry if it's not too smooth. Now, what this is going to need now is at least 2 hours in the fridge to set. But the best thing you can possibly do is make it the day before. It's so much better if it's made the day before and left. It will keep for a week in the fridge, or you can freeze it. Sometimes when you defrost it, some of the liquid will separate out from it and it can be a little bit soggy. It does depend on the amount of fat you have in your cream cheese. A full fat cream cheese will freeze much better than a lower fat version, but it does freeze. But it keeps quite well for a week in the fridge and it is utterly delicious. So this is pretty much it. Now, once you've left it and let it set overnight in the fridge, then what you would do, sorry, back to the hand, Stuart, I've got one more thing to show. Sorry, I've got the decoration to show. So then once you've done it overnight, then what you would do is you would unclasp your springform tin, or if it's in a loose bottom tin, you'd have to push it out. And then sometimes you end up with quite rough edges. So what you might want to do is get a palette knife or just a regular butter knife and just smooth around the edges. So this is the cake as it is, which is lovely as it is, but there's a few different ways that you can use to decorate it. One of them is you could cut very, very fine julienne of lime zest and lay them over the top, which is quite nice. But there's another thing that you can do, which I think looks really pretty. And it's very, very simple. And what you need is you need some green grapes, and I've got green grapes here, which I've washed and I left them wet. So there's a little bit of water in the bottom. So I'm just going to give these a little bit of a mix to make sure that all of these are not soaking wet, but just damp. And on this plate here, I've got a couple of tablespoons of caster sugar. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to frost my grapes. So I'm doing it with green grapes. I think it looks nicest with green grapes. And if you roll your grapes in the sugar, you end up with this lovely frosted grape at the end. So I'm just going to do this with a few of these grapes, and we'll just toss them in the sugar. There we go. And pop them around the edges of my cake. And it just gives it a lovely, pretty finish. Now, what I will say, if you're going to decorate your cheesecake like this, you have to do the decoration at the last minute, because what will happen is if you put it in the fridge with those grapes on, the grapes will, the sugar will just dissolve off the grapes. It will melt off and they'll just be regular green grapes and you won't get that pretty look. But this is fine. So I'm just very quickly doing this. And I will show you what the finished product looks like. And it just gives it a little bit more interest. And what you can also do is, if you like to have a sauce with your cheesecake. There we go. Let me just show you this. So this is my frosted grape design on the top of my cheesecake. And I will post the picture on Facebook afterwards so that you know what it looks like. There's a really nice coulis you can make to go with this cheesecake. Now, you could just go down the raspberry coulis route if you're interested. And the way you do that is you would liquidize up some raspberries with a little bit of icing sugar and a good squeeze of lemon juice, pop it through a sieve, and then that is, you can pour that as a sauce on the cheesecake. But actually, I think it would look nice with a green sauce on this cake, in which case I would make a kiwi sauce to go with it, as kiwi coulis. And all you need to do for a kiwi coulis is you would peel your kiwi up, chop it up, liquidize it, or use a hand blender in a jar, and a bit of sugar, a bit of lemon juice, and that would make a really nice sauce. I've done that a few times. So there we have it. We have our no bake, no fuss lime cheesecake. It could be lime and mascarpone or lime and cream cheese. The original recipe, like I say, calls for mascarpone. Don't forget, though, you should always taste it before you pop it on the base, because it might need more sugar. So there we have it, completely finished. And I think it took us all of 10-15 minutes. So it's a fantastic cake to make. I hope you all have the most wonderful Shavuot next week. And I hope that you manage to eat loads of lovely cheesecake. Now, do you have any questions before I say goodbye? So I'm looking to see if there's only 2 questions in the questions and answer, and those is the ones that we've already been asked. Any other questions before we say goodbye? No? Then thank you very much for joining me, everybody, and for joining Rabbi Gilbert. And I hope to see you all very soon. Bye.